My 3 mistakes might not be what you think, and mistake number 3 took me literally years to realize. Hey, if we haven't met yet, I am Phoenix, I'm the tattooed piano teacher, and I am out here to help new piano teachers start their studio and avoid some of the mistakes that I made when I was starting and grow to be amazing piano teachers. Mistake number 1 is expecting similar results from different students. So let me explain. So we all have what I'm going to call the average student. So we hand them the stack of method books, we send them home with their songs, they bring them back, learned, they practice pretty consistently. They're not wowing us maybe in any particular way, but they're also not lagging behind. They're kind of just working through the materials at the average pace. We have no concerns about them. They're easy to teach, and yeah, they kind of become the standard for all of our students because they are the majority. They are the average student. Now, enter what I'm going to call the slower student, although I don't like that term, but I think that's the clearest way to put it. So the slower student comes in and we explain the same concepts in the same way. We assign the same songs that we would to the average student, but our special slower student doesn't quite latch on to the theory concepts as quickly, and they don't learn their songs as quickly. Maybe they make the same mistakes on their songs week after week after week, and we question. Am I doing something wrong? Is the student just slow? What is going on? When you have a slower student, A, do not assume that they are just a bad student, that they are mentally or behaviorally slower, or that they are not practicing. I found from experience that when a student is moving slower through the concepts and through the materials, there is always something to be discovered about that student. So let me give you some examples of some discoveries that you might look for if you have a student that is not moving through the materials quite as fast. There might be a practice-related discovery. So these are usually the most obvious and the easiest to kind of diagnose and figure out. If your student is not practicing, then that might be just the easiest answer. They just need to practice more. Or they're practicing as much as they can and it's not very much, and that might just be the way it's going to be with that student. However, dig a little deeper, because if that's not the case, they might be practicing super consistently, but their practice time isn't serving them as well as the average student. So they might be playing things over and over again, but they might be playing things in the wrong way, or they might just not be using their practice time efficiently. So if they're practicing 15 minutes every single day, that looks pretty good on paper, but it's not actually translating to growth and progress. And so then you want to work with the parents, depending on how old the student is, to kind of come up with some strategies, and you want to spend lesson time teaching them how to practice. It might just be about spending half of the lesson for a couple of months working on how to practice. Give them some specific, explicit, and tangible ways that they can improve their practice time at home. Another thing I sometimes discover is that the practice space at home is not ideal. So they might be trying to practice, but their piano is in the freezing cold basement and it is shoved in a corner or something like that. Or their piano might be in the center of the home, but they have 7 siblings that are running about when they're trying to practice. So again, working with the parent and the student to create an environment that lets them focus a little bit better. Other discoveries you might make that aren't related to practice is that this student has a special need of some sort. So this could be something like dyslexia that is affecting how they see the music in front of them. They also might have something with their left and right and with their finger numbers. So if they are struggling to process the information from their brain to their hands or from the music to the hands, then that might need some special accommodations. You might have to find some new language to talk about things or a new way of demonstrating skills, and songs. And generally speaking, some students may just have a different learning style than the average student, so they may need things explained in a different way, and you might try different approaches when introducing a new song or a new concept. Perhaps some students will really thrive with a lot of audio learning and listening and giving them listening assignments and hopping on YouTube or Spotify to illustrate new concepts. Some of them might be really hands-on, and so you sit down next to them and you're doing it together and you're showing them. And some students might be more visually oriented, where getting out like a whiteboard and dry erase markers or something like that is just like the way to get through to them on those things. So don't assume that the student is slow simply because they're not processing the information that you're giving them and that the book is giving them in the same way that the average student would process it. There are also talent-related discoveries, and these can be kind of exciting. You might find that your student is sort of a savant in one area, but that's showing up with a little bit of a struggle in another area. For instance, if your student has like perfect pitch or really, really good ear, then you might see that as a student who is struggling big time to read the notes. And it feels like no matter what you do, they have no idea what those notes are. But with a little further digging, you might find that in an area you haven't been focusing on as much, they are actually like kind of a genius. So these are really exciting discoveries. Don't get so hooked up on the way that you want to introduce a concept that you miss entirely this student's potential. And there are other discoveries as well, so you really need to be the detective because each student is unique. But the biggest takeaway here on the slower student is not to assume, to experiment, ask questions, communicate, and figure it out together. But now enter the fast student. So again, we're just kind of comparing to our average student, which is what most students are. And then we have the student that you give them the song and you expect it to take 2 to 3 weeks to learn. They come back with it completely learned and memorized. You barely have to tell them anything. They just get everything right away. These students can kind of slide on by because you do not think there is any problem there. And there isn't a problem. They're doing great. But as a teacher, you do have to ask yourself, are you meeting all of their needs and seeing all of their potential? So just giving the faster student the average student's plan and method book series and everything else, like just treating them the same as the average student, but they just move faster, might be doing them a disservice in some cases. Really quick, here's some ideas if you have a faster student that you could try out just to make sure that you are meeting their needs and keeping them challenged. One is you could keep the same method book series that you use for the majority of your students, but you sight read every so often. So if you come to a page, a song you think, oh, they are gonna pick up on this really quickly, then instead of assigning it for at home, you could have them sight read it in class. And if it goes pretty well, then you say, okay, good enough on that page. That one's done. And I'm gonna assign you the next song. So you're still working through all the same materials, but you're just sort of fast tracking where you feel it would be advantageous to do so. Another idea is to get them a new method series entirely. In the back of my head, I always have like 2 to 3 method series books that I really like, and some of them are great for this student and some of them are great for this student. So if you can find a method book that maybe challenges a little bit more along the way, then switching that student over to a new method series altogether might be the way to go. But on the other hand, you might keep them in the same method book series that they're already in or that you use for your average student, and then you might just pile on a couple of supplemental books. And there are so many great choices out there for adding on a jazz book, a pop book, a classical book, technical books, all sorts of stuff you could add on. You could also skip an entire level in a method book series, but I would save this for very special situations because you might be skipping over an important concept. So you do have to be careful in skipping an entire level of a method book series. All right, that was a long one. So here comes mistake number 2. And if you've made it this far and have found anything helpful or anything that resonated with you so far, would you please hit that like button down below? But on to mistake number 2. So mistake number 1 was expecting similar results from different students. Mistake number 2 is always introducing new songs with the same routine. So I was definitely guilty of this when I first started teaching. Every time we would flip the page to a new song in the lesson book or the performance book, I would have the student go through this little checklist of things that they would have to do. I did the same thing with every new song. It wasn't a bad way to introduce new songs, it's just that I never changed it up. And I did the same thing for every student, no matter what their needs were. And therein lies the mistake. So here's some ideas on how to start a new song in different ways. You could have them figure everything out. So they're figuring out what's the finger for the first note, what is the note, where do I place my hand? Do the same for the other note, or for older kids, what's the key signature, what's the scale, all of that, have them figure everything out on their own, and then they sight read it. So that is one way. Another way is to listen to the original. So if you're playing Ode to Joy on the piano, then you listen to the YouTube video of the full choir, full orchestra, just to get the inspiration of hearing the original version before starting the piano version. Another idea is the teacher plays before the student tries it, so they hear their exact version of the song before they're trying to play it. And then the final way is sometimes I give them a choice. So sometimes I say, would you like to sight read it, or do you want me to play it? Or do you want to play it first, or do you want to hear it first? I have really found that by changing that up, not only do the students not know what to expect, so it keeps things a little bit interesting for them and for me, but also I can kind of gauge what each student needs and give them a different thing on different songs for different students. So it really just sort of personalizes that experience for them. And the last mistake, which if you recall from the introduction, I said it took me years to realize that I was really doing this, is talking too much as the teacher in the lesson, talking too much. Talking. Being able to talk a lot is a great skill for having a YouTube channel, but as a piano teacher, you want to make sure that you're not going the whole time. When I first started, I really had this pressure on me because I was thinking about how much the parents were paying per minute for their lesson. Piano lessons aren't cheap, and I thought I really need to get the most out of this lesson for this student. I wanted to give them their money's worth. So I'm like, I need to bestow all of my wisdom, every single tidbit from college, everything from my experience. If I could go back in time and just tell myself to chill out a little bit. Yes, parents are paying a lot of money for piano lessons, but they're paying for an experience. And part of that experience is a conversation, is a relationship, and don't you think students learn better when they discover things themselves? Don't you love it when one of your students plops down on the bench and said, look what I figured out at home this week. When I play this note and this note, it sounds like this. Oh, brilliant. I mean, that's the lesson they're really gonna learn forever. So yes, we need to talk as we're teaching piano lessons. Yeah, we're gonna need to talk. But if you see your students' eyes glaze over and you think, I've been talking for 10 minutes straight. Yeah, don't do that. Make sure that you are listening. Make sure that some parts of the lesson or some lessons are student-led. Make sure that you are not a professor up in front of the classroom just lecturing. Piano lessons should not be like that. I could talk about that for a lot longer, but I feel like that would kind of defeat the purpose of the mistake number 3, talking too much. So to recap, we had mistake number 1, expecting similar results from different students. Mistake number 2, always introducing new songs with the same routine. And mistake number 3, talking too much. So if you're just getting started as a piano teacher or you haven't started your studio yet, I would encourage you to sign up for my email challenge. It's a 30-day challenge with 12 actionable steps to take to get your business started off on the right foot. And we are going to be talking about setting up your website, about how to find your first students, and all those practical, tangible tips. So if you're interested in that, click on the link in the description and sign up for the 30-day challenge. And if you have made it this far, bless you, and consider subscribing for more piano teacher tips. If you want to keep watching, check out some more mistakes I made when I started. In this video, if I had to start my piano teaching business from scratch today. And I'll see you on the next video.